Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to join the 10th South-South Forum on Sustainability. Apart from the Zoom webinar, we are also live streaming in Putonghua for a Chinese audience. For friends on Zoom, please click the group icon and select your preferred language. I thank today's interpreters, Huang Xiaomei and Pei Haitong, for interpreting in English and Putonghua. My name is Teacher Jadi Margaret. I am Associate Professor at the Institute for Rural Revitalization Strategy at Southwest University, China. I am also a founding member of Global University for Sustainability. I have been actively involved in the rural reconstruction movement in China since 2000 year. Working together with Professor Lau Qinqi, I am coordinating the programs of the South-South Forums. Today, we have the webinar on Gandhian Marxism and local governance. The first speaker is MP Parameswaran from All Indian People's Science Network. Born in Kerala in 1935, Dr. MP Parameswaran received his bachelor's degree from the College of Engineering, Trivandrum, and his PhD in nuclear engineering in 1965 from the Moscow Power Engineering Institute. Until 1975, he worked with the Bahar Atomic Research Institute, leaving only to begin working full-time with the KSSP, Kerala People's Science Movement. MP is a people science activist. He is the founder secretary of the All Indian People Science Movement and the BGVS, a national organization for literacy and education. MP writes prolifically in Malayalam and English. He lives in Thrissur, Kerala. Previously, Qinqi had organized many study tours to Kerala. People science activists like MP, Vinod, and KK demonstrate how the slogan of science for social revolution can be put into practice. They are concerned about improving ordinary people's livelihood, regenerating the spirit of self-reliance, and building urban republics. We invite MP to attend the 5th South-South Forum in 2018. This year, we invite MP again to enrich the debate and discussion on utopia and urban alternatives. However, MP cannot join us in person, but has kindly recorded his speech. Let us listen to MP, please.
Today, the human species is passing through a period of intense crisis, both eco-ecological and socio-cultural. The eco-ecological crisis is the result of overuse and misuse of natural resources such as air, water, forest, and biodiversity, as well as of natural minerals. The atmosphere is getting loaded with pollutants at rates far in excess of its self-cleaning capacity. Clean water is becoming more and more scarce. The fertility of the soil is coming down all over the world, and rate of desertification is increasing. Many important minerals are no longer available. Even fossil fuels will be exhausted in a few decades. All these lead to a stagnation and later reduction in the availability of goods and services. Atmospheric pollution has led to global warming and climate change. The results of this are extreme weather conditions such as floods, cyclones, droughts, etc., which also engendered newer and newer pandemics. The unpredictability of climate and water availability, as well as loss of soil fertility, leads to near stagnation in food production and later reduction in the availability of food and starvation. These, together with increased death from pandemics, will lead to a sharp decline in the population. Another point is that today's economic system is based on growth of global capital. This demands that increased share of the new wealth produced should go into the hands of the rich. Then only it will get converted into capital. In the hands of the poor, they will be barely consumed. Thus, today's economic system demands increase in inequality both within countries and between countries. This inequality will increase the gap between aspirations and realizations of the brute majority. The increase in the use of drugs and narcotics, of crime and corruption, as well as that of criminalization and mafification of the society are the results. These are the results of this. Thus, in spite of the growing wealth of the society, the total human dissatisfaction, global dissatisfaction, as well as unhappiness is increasing. The entire society is aware of this but does not know how to get out of the predicament. This was not unexpected. More than 5 decades ago, the Stockholm Conference on Human Environment has already predicted this. This conference came out with a declaration of what should be done to avoid the future crisis. When we look back, we find that we have not been able to avoid the crisis, but only to strengthen it. A global conference on 50 years after Stockholm came out with more recommendations of what to do to avoid this crisis. Along with the report, a youth vision on the report too was published. In that report, they had a clear vision of what is to be done and what can be done by them. In that, they showed that they rightly understood the importance of healing the wounds on natural capital such as water, soil, air, and biodiversity. Local action can improve the quality of water and soil, whereas air, water, and biodiversity have got global implications. A group of youth, about 20,000, 30,000 in population, and about 30 to 40 square kilometers area, can embark on a program to make their area fully self-sufficient in basic needs. In such a society, they can produce enough surplus to provide for leisure, enjoyment, and other requirements. To achieve this, they should have full control over water availability and continuous increase in soil fertility. Control on water availability can be ensured by enhancing groundwater storage through various ways of recharge techniques. The soil health can be improved by plowing back all the green mass produced in the form of compost to the soil. We should recognize the importance of dairy in improving the soil health. Cattle gives us not only milk but also dung. We may assume that each liter of milk will produce at least 3 kilograms of dung and 1 liter of urine. 40% of this will be sufficient to produce the required feed and fodder. The rest can be used for biogas and agriculture. The cattle farming is a biological chain reactor similar to that of a nuclear reactor. In a society of 20,000 people, there is scope for 100 dairy units each producing 100 liters per day. Tending these cows as well as rearing cows and dry cows as well as production of feed and fodder can give employment to more than 1,000 to 1,200 people. cultivation of vegetables, tubers, etc. can provide employment to 1,000 to 2,000. Setting up of industrial units to process excess agricultural products as well as repair and maintenance of various implements as well as setting up of biogas plants, SPV plants, etc. can provide further employment. Thus the area will be both rural and industrial in character. In this urban society, there will be no surplus to provide for healthcare, education and administration. Such a urban society, not requiring anything from outside for subsistence, can be almost self-reliant and will not be affected by global happening. The new world, consisting of a federation of hundreds of thousands of such urban republics, self-reliant, self-sufficient and sustainable rural republic is what the youth aspire. This can be considered as the 21st century version of the Gandhian concept of federation of self-reliant village republic, or the Marxian concept of the union of self-reliant urban Soviets.
Okay, thank you very much, MP presentation about his idea of urban republics. And next we will continue to discuss. And the second speaker is K.K. Krishna Kumar. He graduated in mechanical engineering. He worked as an editor of books on science and technology at the State Institute of Languages, Kerala. He has been an activist of KSSP since 1972. He worked as his General Secretary and President of KSSP. He was one of the directors of the Kerala Total Literacy Program in 1990 to 91. He worked with BGVS and AIPSN for many years. He was a secretary and president of BGVS. He has authored some popular science books. So KK, please.
We have listened to Dr. Parameswaran's idea about rural, autonomous, self-reliant, rural, urban republics. Since I have had opportunity to work with Dr. Parameswaran for several years, we have been discussing, occasionally agreeing, disagreeing with this idea. A synthesis of Marx's concept of ending the contradiction between town and country with a Gandhian vision of a network of self-reliant village republics in the form of grand oceanic circles. This is what he has been arguing always. So now what I will try to do is to present an experiment that we undertook in Kerala to see whether this ideal can be made real. So the gap between the ideal or utopia that MP has been presenting and what exactly is happening on the ground with respect to an experiment that we undertook in Kerala in 1996-98. This experiment is called the People's Plan Program, where people in the villages, in the Gram Panchayats, Panchayats are the villages, village self-governments in Kerala, they got an opportunity to undertake planning process. Entire planning and development programs were undertaken by people. The program was a government program undertaken in collaboration with various movements, including our movement, People Science Movement. And it went on from 96 to 98. This initiated a major process of rural development, decentralization. Planning was all the time done centrally in India. When India became independent, the Soviet model of 5-year planning was undertaken, and from 1950 onwards, we were having 5-year plans. The plans were done, whether how the village should develop and what should happen in the village. Everything was planned, mostly in the capital city, either of the nation or to some extent of the states. There were discussions about decentralization since long. India has a history of self-reliant rural economies or villages, etc. But colonialism destroyed all that and brought in oppressive structures suitable to colonial masters. But our father of nation, Gandhiji, always had passionate views about self-reliant village republics, and he believed that the independent India should have the foundation of development of independent India should be the village republics. There were lots of differences about it. Some of the leaders of Congress party disagreed with him because they did not want to part with power. Some others disagreed. People like Ambedkar, who is known to be the father of our constitution, Indian constitution, a well-known lawyer, a social activist. He said there was village republics and so on, but the character of village republics in the village has completely changed because of various reasons. It has now become pits of ignorance and all kinds of what you call social injustice. So that cannot be the foundation of village Indian development at this point of time. This was his argument. Anyway, the idea of decentralization and village republics continued, and it got a space in the Indian constitution. But it remained dormant for a long time. Those village republics were there in theory, but nothing, not much power was ever exercised. They were allowed to do anything. In 1990s, when Rajiv Gandhi, young prime minister, took over, by that time, there was a lot of discussion about decentralization, the importance of decentralization because of various other developments. The centralization of power was becoming horrible. By that time, globalization had taken over. So the centralization further got aggravated. A lot of discussion about the injustice that is being done. A lot of people were protesting against it. Organizations like KSSP undertook several movements or protests against it. We undertook a Power to People campaign in Kerala. And there was a Hamara Desh. Hamara Desh means our country campaign all over India. In all these places, the importance of decentralization was brought into public discussion. Lots of victims of development participated in these programs. Anyway, at the time of Rajiv Gandhi, this idea of decentralization again came to center stage, and he brought in 2 constitutional amendments, which are known as the 72nd and 73rd amendments. These brought back the idea of panchayat. Panchayat or village self-government should become the center of development. They should have autonomy. They should have financial autonomy. Elections should be the panchayat. Elected representatives should lead the village panchayat or village self-government. All these were incorporated into the amendment. But unfortunately, again, the paper was set right, but actual programs did not progress much because of differences of opinion at various. Ultimately, the point was people in the power did not want to part with their powers. Anyway, Kerala, which has been generally different. You must have heard about Kerala. Kerala is a state at the southwestern tip of India. known for its left-leaning politics. Kerala elected the first communist government in 1957, and Kerala is famous for the Kerala model of development, where with less investment, greater quality of life, especially with respect to health and education, has been achieved. So Kerala has been all the time experimenting. Kerala is famous for its large network of libraries. Kerala is famous for its people science movement, about which Margaret mentioned. So participation, the agency of participation, has been historically strong in Kerala. And in 1996, when the left front government came to power, Kerala has always been having a left parties in power, and even in the right is sometimes having a left attitude in Kerala. That is what generally people say. So the left front government, which came to power in 1996, decided to undertake a major decentralization campaign. They called it a People's Plan campaign. The decision was basically the entire planning process should take place not at the center level, at the village level. But in order for this to take place, people should be made aware of what is planning. Generally, people never thought that planning is our duty. They were victims or subjects of planning only. So this campaign, government undertook the campaign with the help of all movements, including People's Science Movement. There were some thrust areas. The idea was to make the village self-government. Kerala has 3-tier panchayats, village local self-government. The preliminary body is the village government. Next to that comes the block government and the district government, 3-tier panchayats. The fundamental unit is the village panchayat. The idea of the campaign was people in the villages must be empowered to review and develop their own village plans. What should happen in the village over the coming 5 years? What should happen in the field of education? What should happen in the field of health? What should happen to irrigation, agriculture? Every aspect should be planned. Every village should plan its own 5-year plans. For this, resource person should be trained. Large number of development volunteers were recruited. It was no longer an expert's job. Planning was generally considered to be an expert's job, but this campaign decided that it should be people's job. Involvement of the people was ensured. And even before this campaign, a number of programs had been undertaken by KSSP and other organizations, which proved that such participation is possible. One example was the People's Literacy Campaign. A massive literacy program was taken up in 1989-90, where a government program was transformed into a people's movement and a voluntary people's movement. Literacy was generally done by the education department. Government officials undertook a plan, and seldom it worked well because the participation was lacking. We transformed it to a people's participation. I will not go into the details, but it became a major campaign. It was initiated in one district in Kerala, later expanded to the state of Kerala, and further expanded to all India level. A national literacy campaign which helped to increase the literacy percentage in India as a whole, and proved that such programs are possible with great participation of the people. It brought to us the advantages such a campaign. The creative energy of people makes the campaign very rich. The traditional ideas, modern ideas, everything merged together at the village level, and people start involving themselves with their heart. They contribute heartfully. Large number of volunteers worked without any financial requirements. They were absolute volunteers. They thought that making people literate is our task. Similarly, so we drew a lot of inspiration for this campaign in the People's Plan campaign. So coming back to the People's Plan campaign, the idea was to establish the village self-government as bodies which are capable of planning everything, starting from education to health to agriculture, what should happen for the 5 years, etc., in order to review what happened in the name of development, critically review what is happening, etc., The planning was demystified. It was generally considered to be an expert's job. For the first time, we started talking about people's planning. Why can't people plan? Because after all, it's about their life. So why can't they plan? And lots of training programs, a lot of material, a lot of demystification, a lot of environment creation program. Nobody in the society should keep away. Everybody had a role. And we found that as you are able to point out that you have a role in the campaign, in the planning, in the development, then people come. And once it becomes their program, not a government program for them, but a people's program, people planning for themselves, for their own development, then it becomes much more creative. A number of ideas come from the people. Suddenly their traditional experience comes into the planning process, etc. So there are a lot of details. I'll not go into the details. There were some basic principles: autonomy of the village self-government, subsidiarity, all the ideas that can be kind of generated at the village level, problems that can be solved at the village level should be solved at that level. Only things that cannot be solved at that level should be allowed to flow into the next level. This principle of subsidiarity, the principle of complementarity, all the 3 tiers of self-government complementing each other, participation. At every level, people should be allowed to participate in the plan discussions, in the criticism, a review of what happened in the name of development, etc., etc. And for 2 years, we were able to kind of generate a big campaign, lot of people participating in the planning process. Every village was throbbing with enthusiasm, and large number of new ideas came in. Ideas, whether it is education or health, it varied from place to place because people were for the first time able to apply specific conditionalities. Each area has a specific problem, so planning should take that into account. They also have their very specific ideas, their traditional culture coming in, etc., etc. All these people's ideas were mingled with the planning process and development process. So this was a big success, and despite various kinds of critiques coming from different corners, the People's Plan campaign 1996-98 became a major success. Now we are celebrating the 25th year. The plan, the program that was initiated in 1996-98 is still continuing. Some aspects of this plan has been consolidated. Now we have a firm people's self-government, 3-tier government in place. Most important thing is that nobody can deny that now. And second important aspect is it is not the structure, the administrative structure where people have a say is intact. A second important thing is that financial allocations. Normally, villages will have lots of plans, but they will never get any finance to implement that. Here, the state government decided that a certain amount, a substantial percentage of income will set apart and will directly flow into the villages. So 40% of what we can, what we call the plan funds now directly flow into the villages. So this provided ample resources for them to implement the plans that people make. So people's plan were implemented with sufficient resources and participation. Several sectors, now a lot of reviews are going on after 25 years, and we find many of the things that we have achieved a lot of achievements are substantial, especially in the field of health, education, and so on. In the field of education, we were facing, especially during the peak of globalization, education was almost taken over by the private sector. Now there is a reversal. We were able to improve the quality of public educational institutions. Participation of the local self-governments in education is calling children back. The students who are migrating to private schools are now coming back to public schools. The quality of the school education, as the infrastructure, facilities, etc., substantially increased. The same thing happened in the health sector also. Public health facilities, which were again migrating into the private sector as a result of globalization, is now coming back to the public sector. The private hospitals are also there, but public hospitals, the government hospitals, etc., have improved substantially in quality. There are areas where such development has not been possible for agriculture sector. The kind of development that we expected did not happen. Anyway, I will not go into the details, but the crux of the matter is that some aspects of decentralization are staying, they have been consolidated and are continuing. But there are weaknesses as well. After 25 years, many review reports have come in, and I would like to focus on some of the weaknesses as well. Some weaknesses, main weakness is the tension between the overall globalization tendencies that are that creates the environment. The global discussion about various aspects of globalization, commercialization, climate change, everything is very much real in Kerala as well. Sometimes even the left political parties are taken over by such globalization policies. So the tension between the overall environment of globalization, centralization, and between the village self-governments, and the idea of village self-government are not able to kind of sufficiently survive effectively in the face of various globalized policies, corporate entities coming in, etc., etc. That's one of the major threats. So even the ideological base of decentralization is not very strong still. Political parties still waver around it. They are for decentralization, but many of their policies, partly because of the pressure from outside, central government, etc., partly because of financial matter, they don't have that kind of financial autonomy. Anyway, the threat from the globalized situation is there very much on the local bodies. Secondly, the political parties, most of the political parties have a highly centralized structures. So their structure, their political party structures, and the decentralized structure of the local self-government has many self-contradictory aspects. So the leaders who come out of a highly centralized political party, they find it very difficult to cope up with the decentralized process. Third, there is a tension between the people's representatives who are products of political parties, traditional political parties, which centralized structure. So they sometimes consider they are all for decentralization up to them. Beyond them, decentralization is very inconvenient for them. Once they get elected, they think that the power should remain with us. They are not able to part it with the people. They don't understand the meaning of democracy by the people. They think democracy by the representatives. This tension between the people's representatives and people is becoming evident. Another thing is a certain kind of what you call a participation fatigue, the kind of enthusiastic participation by the people, which we had seen during 1996-98 campaign, that much the quality of participation is diminishing. Quantity of participation is also diminishing. Whenever such participation fatigue existed, in campaigns, we bring in creative ideas, environmental creation activities, a lot of cultural elements into it, debates with people, etc., etc. But the bureaucratic elements which are slowly taking over, whenever the campaign is little slowed down, and the campaign, when it gets institutionalized, the bureaucratic forces again take over. So we've understood that it's a constant fight. You cannot decentralize and leave it. Decentralization versus centralization is a constant fight. You have to consistently, continuously fight against tendencies of centralization, tendencies of bureaucratization, tendencies of globalization. So new creative modes of kind of fighting it out will have to be invented. We are in the process. We are now thinking of taking up another campaign at the end of 25th year. Probably we will have to go for another campaign. We will have to relearn. We have to go back to people and re-energize ourselves. People who have become a little inert and inactive will have to be re-energized. We will have to, activists will have to energize themselves with greater interaction with people and their participation and the transparent dialogues, their connect with the campaign is the real energizing thing. We are making our attempts towards that. I'll not take much more time. So basically there is lot of gap between the ideal that MP has presented and the reality on the ground. But we are not negative at all. We are not in any manner feeling that it's not possible. We are fighting with a lot of hope. But again, I want to stress that it's a fight. It's not that you can leave it at that. You have to continue to fight, and we are continuing the fight with a lot of hope and conviction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, KK, and provide us a historical review and evaluation of Kerala experience. And next, the speaker is Anita Ramha. She is a physicist by training. She was the Dean, Faculty of Education, Delhi University. She is an EC member of the International Commission on Mathematics Instruction. She was a Nehru Fellow, Director of the National Literacy Resources Center at the National Academy of Administration, Missouri, and was involved in the National Curriculum Framework 2005, as well as the chairperson of the NCERT primary textbook development teams. She has been part of national policy advisory committees, educational initiative of states, the right to education, the People's Science Movement, national literacy campaigns, and the Hoshangaba Science Teaching Program. She works in the areas of policy studies, curriculum studies, education for sustainable development, critical mathematics education, science, technology, society studies, and teacher education. So please, Anita.
It's an honor to be here in a session with MP. And we have always been inspired working with MP. So Margaret, is my sound okay? Is the sound
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, so I'll take these ideas which have been shared by MP and KK into the direction of education. And I'll say that when we were working in the National Literacy Campaign, which was the largest campaign that many of us engaged with, and MP had overnight sort of brought us into that. We were all working in people's science movements from different aspects. KK has mentioned Kerala. I was working in in Madhya Pradesh at that time with Vinod, and we were working in science education, and we were looking at education and science from a socio-cultural context of the children and teachers there. So while when we suddenly jumped into literacy, and all of us were a little surprised because we hadn't really worked with adults and with basic education, the earliest foundational stage. But that was a major turning point for my work in education. And I was the director of the National Literacy Resource Center, which was set up as part of our people's movement. It was set up in the Academy of Administration, where all the administrators are trained. And the idea was to facilitate a participatory governance from especially the newly trained administrators. And what was interesting was that through the academy, I had started some work in numeracy, because I realized that in terms of literacy, we were able to make a headway in a participatory way, especially in many different languages, very unusual from the initial historical way in which education was done when at the state level things happened. But in numeracy, I realized that things were not good the way adult numeracy had been earlier done, because we treated them, the materials and primers and instructors treated adults like children, even worse than children. And all the materials were making them count flowers and ducks and birds. And people knew much more. I mean, they couldn't read and write, but their mathematics and their numeracy and their everyday mathematics, their artisanal knowledge and the way they used maths was so much deeper and so vast. So that was an area which was very demeaning to be using those kind of materials. And so I started working on adult numeracy. And I also had some colleagues who in other states had looked at folk mathematics. So we used folk mathematics, people's artisanal knowledges, people's everyday mathematics, and we use cultural sort of notions of mathematics when people even today are using a lot of puzzles and stories and quizzes at the way they do oral mathematics. And so for the first time, we also engaged in trying to understand, how do you look at knowledge in a different way? How do you look at in the Freirean sense? We are talking of sort of reading the world by people themselves for the first time. And I was also looking at it in terms of writing the world, RIGHTING, that how do you look at it and then you act on it. So it was interesting from this work in numeracy. And today, again, I got involved in that, and I realized that there is a small international group which actually saw the textbooks that I developed at the national level. In 2005, when we started making textbooks for the country at the national level, I realized that a lot of the reasons why science and mathematics become so alienating for a large majority is also because we as educators don't understand the ways in which mathematics is anyway done, the knowledge that people do have, and we alienate them by these formal methods of doing certain mathematics, even algorithms of doing division in a certain way, which they can't relate to in the way that they might be actually enacting mathematics, in their lives. And so we developed textbooks differently. Even the art that we use, we said even the artists had to be sensitive to cultural notions and various ways of using representations, artistic visuals through folk art and many different ways, because mathematics and science materials, textbooks are generally so limited and so, in a way, alienating to most of our people, and it gives them a sense of being totally unable to deal with these things. So we had already worked in science at the middle school level with teachers, but this was a completely sort of larger field for me to understand, start looking at artisanal knowledge and start looking at how these disciplines today continue to act as gatekeepers. When they make people feel that there are these gates for going in for higher education, professional education, whatever you're doing, you have to do mathematics, and it makes most people feel that they cannot deal with it. So how do you democratize knowledge? How do you democratize these disciplines? And also in the way there is a participation in which how people are participating in doing this. In our country, in any way, education is most sort of, there are hierarchies in education. Only some people manage to go into what are called the academic courses, or they manage to go in for higher education. The rest are now, our current policy in 2020 now is pushing half the children into vocational education, but that is not creative vocational education. It's a very minimalist, it's more skills rather than knowledge. So there's hardly any education, it's just skills. And so you're creating people for the labor market, you're pushing them early without allowing them a space and a chance for critical education. Critical education which allows people to question justice, to question inequalities, to question sustainable development, to question ecological justice. So that is what education is. How do you ensure right from the beginning that those gates are not closed on most people? I mean, so that for us was democratizing education, and that has continued. I mean, at the international level, I'm with some allies and people who feel similarly about mathematics and equity and mathematics and social justice. We are, and mathematics related to work, related to our everyday knowledge. We are sort of pushing the borders and frontiers within the international mathematics education, because we can see that the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development, OECD, is standardizing all curricula, is standardizing science and mathematics in most countries. It's pushing through its program for international student assessment. This is the PISA test. Luckily, we have resisted. India has not entered, but India has declared, this government had declared, we will enter into international rankings and competition. And as far as the ideas of Gandhi and what, like MP was telling us, how we now look at education, standardization is the worst thing that we can do for all our people. I mean, education, even science and mathematics, has strong socio-cultural, historical, even political roots and basis, and you cannot just standardize, because then you push people out. And also international rankings. I mean, I have critiqued this and written about this inner handbook, which is just coming out, where OECD now looks at how mathematics should be taught and looks at employment only in the global north. They look at the countries of the global north and they say, well, you know, it was a long time back when people used to take, waiters in restaurants used to take orders by hand and calculate the bill by hand. Now people do it on their tablets. It was a long time back when carpenters used to look at trigonometry and design their work through that. So which is this world that they are talking about? And they're pushing, they're saying we don't need basic geometry, we don't need these things, because now we need big data and people can always access these things on the internet. So clearly they are pushing countries towards a curriculum which is not aligned at all for the large majority, certainly not the global south. And by global south, I don't mean a country or a place or a location, it's people, wherever. There's a global south in France, there's a global south in Hong Kong. I mean, you know, this is the kind of pushing out of people that we do right at the beginning, at the early ages of education. And that is what we are contesting, because we are saying these kinds of even primary school science or mathematics does not include people, it is not inclusive, it does not help self-reliance, and it does not help that knowledge which understands. I mean, it is indigenous knowledge which understands sustainability to some extent. We have seen in our own communities that when ecological disasters have happened, and often these are human-made disasters, and we know in climate change, it is people's knowledge that has helped them go and see those, understand those, reckon those things before they happened, even before the scientific instruments had sometimes measured that a cyclone was going to come. People knew that they had to go to safer places. This has been recorded, documented in Andaman's Islands. So what is it that we understand? We are deliberately, through education, creating more hierarchies and pushing indigenous people. And when I say indigenous, it's not only tribal people, it is artisanal people, our farmers. People are being pushed into skill-based jobs and work with no criticality, with no choice and options to go in for higher education, critical education. So that for us is a battle. That for us is a battle, as just as well the battle is on knowledge commons. I mean, there are some scientists who are today, and especially after COVID, are battling for the knowledge commons, knowledge which is not bounded by patents, not bounded by resources and countries who can hang on to that, and companies and corporate interests. So what is the way that scientists and other activists can be working in a way that when you need it, and we saw that during COVID, it was quite amazing. It was only when the vaccine was being made that the companies came in and started exercising certain reservations and restrictions and not sharing it. But what is it? If we are talking of the urban as the republics of self-reliance, when we are talking of small groups and in the Gandhian sense, so in the last few years, I have been taking and running a master's course with a university in Switzerland, which actually works in teacher education. And there's a person there, and we were working together in textbooks, and she realized that the way we look at resources, for instance, the kind of chapter we might write on forests, is very different from how forests are looked at from the global north. You know, we looked at textbooks in Canada and other countries, and they look at it purely as timber. And how do you best manage forest in terms of best optimize the sale of timber? And when we wrote something, we said, whose forests are these? And we looked at a true life story of a woman in Jharkhand who lives in forests, who's grown up in forests. And, she says, how do I use education? She goes to school, which is far from her community, because she is told by her uncle that if you care for your forests and you want to save your forests, you have to get education. And she goes to study in a school which is quite far. She comes back, she goes to college, she comes back, and now she's running an organization which takes children of the community to try and understand and read the world. And when she speaks, she says, forests are like books which we have to read. It's almost like Freire speaking, and she may not have taken it from Paulo Freire, who says you read the world. So literacy and numeracy is to read the world, and she is doing that, and how they're struggling against contracts, struggling against big industries. In fact, there's a major struggle today in our country about mining and deforestation, and about the seas, and about trawlers, and about fish. So when we write now in our national textbooks, and we don't know how long they will remain, because we've been told they're going next year. We've been told that the entire discipline of environmental studies, which I had worked on, which integrates primary science, primary social science, and environmental education as a mandatory subject in class grades 3, 4, 5 for children age 8 to 11, the first integrated subject that they study, and they look at it through people's lives. If they look at food, they look at hunger. They look at farmers, they look at who grows the food. They just don't look at only proteins and carbohydrates. So while doing this, I've been working with the school that Gandhiji had started. It closed down for some years. It was restarted a few years back. And that school philosophy is called Nai Talim, which means new education, which at that time was a decolonized form, a decolonizing way of looking at education. But today, it's as important for us to fight for hierarchies between caste, because today our government is now making it again a very, very Brahmanical, which is the upper caste knowledge is going to dominate. So and the lower caste is being stigmatized even more. And, today we hear physical attacks. So how does school education nurture democracy? How does school education nurture people's knowledge? How does school education nurture sustainable development? Because the way education ties up with a very sort of a devastating form of development and a very elitist form of development, which is totally has no sympathy or empathy with people who look at natural resources not as trying to extract them, not as trying to exploit nature for profit, but they tie their lives with it. So how do you get this kind of a thinking, this kind of an empathy, this kind of a feeling and a relationship with the earth, relationship with nature? How do you bring yourself? How do you bring the people and the planet? I mean, how do you get these sympathies from people's own understandings? We are not creating very new understandings. We're just creating ideas of ecological justice. And we are trying to get, for instance, when Swiss teachers come to this school, to the Gandhian school, we are challenging them and saying, let us develop a theme around cotton. How will we teach cotton here in this school? And how will you teach cotton when you go back to Switzerland? And it's fascinating. Often they've never thought of cotton. Even when I went to their schools in Switzerland and asked them, what is it you're wearing? This t-shirt, what is it made of? They didn't know. They just looked at their labels and they had to read what the t-shirt was made of. So starting from there, because their sustainable development is only less consumption. That is what they're saying, which is true, which is also what we are saying in terms of greed and need. But for us, it is not just less consumption. For us, it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of life and death. And so for us, we really need to understand. So when they come and they start looking at cotton, they look at the history of cotton. They look at why Gandhi was talking about everyone learning how to spin the yarn and make the yarn for themselves. What was that, the spinning wheel as a technology? What did it mean in terms of self-reliance and in terms of solidarity? When everyone sits and is doing that, what kind of collective solidarities were coming as a part of the freedom struggle? This is all before 1947. So that is a compulsory part of schooling in the Gandhian ashram. Every child learns to spin the charkha, the spinning wheel. And at different stages, what does that mean? In terms of the child's psychology, in terms of the child's abilities, and what does work mean? How does work in education get integrated? Work is not separate from education. It is not only for some people who are considered not good in education that they should be pushed into skills. So we don't talk of vocations. In our country, vocation is tied to caste, which is a social hierarchy, which is really, really demeaning. And so what we do is we try to understand that the children in the Gandhi school are growing their own food. They are cooking it as a compulsory part of school. They are selling it as part of their learning and part of their education. And what is it they're learning from that? So how do they look at sustainable development? Because they understand farmers better, since they are also doing farming as part of education. And today our farmers are in distress. And we ask, Why are farmers committing suicide? They are taking pesticide, the same pesticide, and they are killing themselves in thousands. So we are trying, and fascinating that the Swiss students came and told us they calculated the water footprint. Carbon footprint is a very abstract idea. So they calculated the water footprint of a t-shirt. And they were telling us and sharing with students that when we do this together, we realize that, when we are taking cotton to make a t-shirt in our country, or even to take it to some other country and then to our country, it's not just the cotton. We are taking about 1,500 liters of water or something, depending on the size of the t-shirt. So, and that was really amazing. I mean, it was huge. It was a huge number, which is sometimes in thousands, if it's a denim jeans. And so people were shocked and said, we don't need water. We have so much water in Switzerland. But when we take one garment from India, from the cloth, from the cotton that is grown here, we are also taking so much water. So I'm just saying that these kinds of interests and discussions build solidarities. The idea is to have, if we do a transnational form of education, transnational does not mean standardized. It means we look at something grown somewhere, and children in another country then see where is that garment being made, and they follow the story, and they follow the knowledge, and they follow the mathematics to the point that they are getting it. So these are the kinds of ways that we are working both at our national level, we are working at the international level in trying to build these sensibilities, and also look at sustainable development as part of our early learning of various disciplines, and look at education from a democratizing perspective and from a self-reliant perspective. So I'll just close it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. And you demonstrate how the organic intellectual intervene into formal schooling, and also to urge for education for social revolution. So I completely agree with your idea, and also how to revisit Gandhian idea and in current challenges of globalization and colonization too. So thank you very much. And the last speaker is Mano Rajan Mohanty. He was a professor of political science and director, Developing Countries Research Center at University of Delhi, where he taught comparative politics, Chinese politics and research methodology. Currently, he is a distinguished professor at the Council for Social Development, New Delhi, where until recently he edited the CSD Sage journal Social Change. He is a social scientist, China scholar, and a peace and human rights activist with research interests in the study of political economy of China, India, and global transformation. He is an emeritus fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies, is founding member and former chairperson. He is also the emeritus chairperson, Development Research Institute, Bhubaneswar, the research wing of Gandhian, of which he was the founder president. So please, Mano, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to be part of this panel. MP in his book, The Dreams Without an Expiry Date, had quoted Vinod Raina, who first called him in one of the conversations, our friend, the late Vinod Raina, called him an incorrigible optimist. I think, it's about the dreamers who want a transformation to be engaged in the place where they are, in the time that they live in, from then on. So that is the spirit in which we have seen this community, which has come together in the South-South Forum, this year, earlier years, or the arena community as a whole. And we are part of such communities in our own countries and also globally. So it's really that spirit which we share and celebrate, that optimism in the face of a world where, neoliberal capitalism in the Silicon Age is pushing the world in just the opposite direction from all the values that MP talked about, from combining Marx and Gandhi. I must tell you, I'm a Marxist, Gandhian, feminist, environmentalist, Ambedkarite, and part of a creative theory movement, which addresses new questions and asks questions to all these traditions. But from Marx, we got the historical and dialectical materialist outlook, which has been a great help in really appreciating Ambedkar and Gandhi and the other challenges that MP talked about today and has been talking about. Now, because our whole forum is on thinking new horizons, and as Anita pointed out, several movements are on to really concretely work towards new horizons. Today, when you take the Parmeshwaran framework, I will just take one of his ideas and then raise some observations and the possibilities, mainly two possibilities arising out of that. His idea, and KK actually illustrated those ideas in practice, that how do we work in the old society to build the new society? In other words, what are the possibilities? And we know, and KK's very balanced statement, giving the great initiatives of the People's Plan campaign, literacy campaign, the Kutumbasri. I'm a great admirer of the Kutumbasri campaign in Kerala as well, and so on. And Anita's many examples also. I think they show, and today KK said, 20, 30,000 youth can start, for example, on a water plant and so on. In other words, how do you start doing something to take you towards your dream from there itself, from where we are? Now, I think if you take, you have put it as local governance, the formulation itself limits it. It's, from local governance is a term which neoliberal framework where local governance has been really resorted to as an implementation machinery of centrally designed global center and national center. Earlier, it was the Planning Commission. Now, in India, for example, it is the Prime Minister's Office. Niti Aayog is an NGO, making studies. Earlier, it was our Planning Commission. So, Planning Commission to PMO or the global planners, global policymakers, they do something as the best possible solution for the world, and how that is to come down through the various agencies to the local level to be implemented. Even the Gram Sabha has been reduced to, and manipulated by the local political parties, has been reduced to choice of beneficiaries for those plans, those policies, those programs, because all money comes from the top, you see. So local governance term has to be replaced by Gram Swaraj, or in Parameswaran's term, framework, the self-reliant village republic. So, it's part of the people's self-determination at the local level, at the village level. And that's why I greatly admire this effort to use the term rural, because capitalism during the last 300 years defined progress as urbanization. I think to challenge that is to really, as MP really quotes Marx very well, the production process is decentralized and dispersed in such a way that it is all over. And the distinction between town and country breaks down. So what are the two observations that I will make are: A, you have to place it in the current stage of capitalism. I think Gandhi and Marx provided us the frameworks, Ambedkar also. But today, silicon capitalism in the so-called fourth industrial revolution time, where AI is the driving force, creating a post-human framework of life and management and economy, there still the value is that of accumulation and management. And that is done through merger, centralization. So the nature of capitalism requires a much firmer assertion of local people's rights, indigenous people's rights, people's rights everywhere. That's why the future struggle is going to be struggle to assert rights of earth, rights of rivers, rights of nature, along with rights of humans. Anyway, that's one. The second thing is that the wherever small trends to transform are introduced, they're immediately manipulated, suppressed. For example, now in India, the present regime has started the process, and it has announced the basic framework, a new national curriculum framework, replacing the 2005, of which Anita was a part. And we were also, optimistic and enthusiastic about a democratic, sustainable, egalitarian, culturally compatible, non-alienating, knowledge system. So we have to admit the danger of oppression everywhere, and this centralization process, because you have global silicon capitalism's allies right down to my village. So we have to admit that and design our strategy accordingly. Therefore, the two possibilities which arise from Marx, Gandhi, Ambedkar, our people's movements. I'm speaking today. I speak always as a teacher who has tried to interact with people's movements in India to bring their experience and their knowledge to the classroom and the books and the so-called professional world. And very unsuccessfully, I must say, but the effort, people like Anita and many of you, I'm doing the same thing. So there are two things which are of great help to us. The swa, the self, in Swaraj, meaning self-rule, self-determination. Now, in Gandhi and Marx, self had a very different meaning from capitalism as well as fascism. or, the fascism's many versions, including racial exclusivism and so on, white supremacy, Hindu supremacy, or whatever, Islamic supremacy, Christian supremacy, or whatever. Now, self must not be an obsessive self, because capitalism has turned self to be an atomistic, individualist, acquisitive self. That's where competition becomes the norm, not cooperation, not self, the individual in relationships, not the Ubuntu concept of self. I am because you are. Not the Bien Vivir concept of self. Between all humans, all creatures, and all systems of nature, how they're interdependent, and good living depends on that. So, and opposite of that is the nation as self. We have a Hindutva ideology which equates self with nation, not individual, not an oppressed group seeking liberation, not a region seeking self-determination. Okay? So self as nation and self as atomistic individual. Both are obsessive selves. You have to replace that with creative self. Civilization of the earth for millennia shows the creativity of this whole process. Humans and Earth's much life systems, trying to create new possibilities which give meaning to life. So this idea derives from Gandhi, Ambedkar, right down Gandhi, Marx, Gandhi, Ambedkar, right down to MP Parameshwar. Creative self and not obsessive self. All the racial conflicts, religious conflicts, ethnic, exclusivist, chauvinistic conflicts, great nation chauvinism, all these are obsessive self. The second possibility that emerges from our movements and from the whole history of workers' movement, workers' politics, communist movement, revolutions, Gandhian satyagrahas, and the African liberation struggles, Latin American liberation struggles, the Bien Vivir movements, and the liberation struggles in all colonies, all the Chefang movements. That is about differentiating between the concept of labor that capitalism has presented and civilization has presented, the concept of capitalism presented from slave society to all class societies and caste societies. Till today, labor has been graded and degraded. Manual labor has been degraded, and mental labor, so-called technical labor, and now, in the fourth industrial revolution, some higher form of intelligence and so on. So labor has been graded, some labor has been degraded. Accordingly, economy has been graded, some economies have been degraded. So agriculture, old agriculture depending on manual labor is supposed to be a primitive or backward society, backward economy. And industrial revolution is forward. Then service industry is even higher. Technological industry is even better. And fourth industrial revolution is knowledge economy, knowledge society, based on robotics and so on. X. Now, yesterday. Anyway, so we have to question that. And Parameshwaran has a great section in his earlier works and now in this document which you have circulated also. And we have been, during the COVID, the migrant labor in India and all over the world, how they suffered. And this degradation of economies, degradation of labor came to light very vividly. But it has been demonstrated throughout history. We have to have a new concept of labor. All labor involves hand and brain, all labor. So the distinction between manual and mental labor has to be placed. And the education policy that Anita talked about is premised. New education policy, national education policy in India is premised upon this gradation and degradation of labor and economies. It has to be created. Silicon capitalism's basic philosophy is based on that. Colonialism had propagated this theory of obsessive self as well as gradation and degradation. Therefore, friends, if we want to dream about a new society, a society of Swaraj and Satyagraha, Swaraj and Samata. Samata is equality. Because I think 21st century is a century of struggle towards Samata, equality, in every sphere, of every kind. And through Chefa, through liberation struggles in all realms, on the foundational principle of mutuality or Ubuntu, so that in Vivir, our ideal living, ideal society, where Swaraj is realized and in practice and continuously. See, Swaraj is a continuously evolving and self-developing process, liberation process. This is why creative society is an unfolding process of Swaraj, Ubuntu, Chefan, and Samata, because new inequalities arise and you address them. And that is why new solidarities we have to force to pursue the dreams of Buddha, of Ambedkar, of Marx, of Gandhi, and of MP Parameswaran, and all of us who have gathered here. Jai Jagat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mano. Yeah, I agree that there are many different experience and alternative ideas like Buen, Vivir and Ubuntu, and of course a Gandhian idea that help us to find alternatives in this capitalist globalization. So, and how can we recognize the grassroots alternatives at particularly like the Kerala experiment? And I would like to invite TG, because KK also mentioned that TG has a lot of experience involved in the Kerala experiment. So I would like to invite TG to say something. So TG, could you open your camera? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Margaret, for providing me this opportunity to speak in this Augustus platform. I would like to respond mainly to the proposal of Dr. MP and what has been presented here by KK. As a practitioner of decentralization in a limited way, we have been getting a lot of advice and suggestions and propositions from Dr. MP. And to an extent, we have been trying to do many things in Kerala context and in a limited way at the national context of India. So my first response to MP's proposition of a self-sufficient rural-urban republic federated at the national level. And again, it was proclaimed by Gandhi and Marx. This is a very, very difficult proposition to be in practice. Maybe this has been experimented in many places, but most of them have been unsustainable. It ran for some time, but later it became unsustainable. Think about the Gram
Um,
Swaraj experience Gandhi itself. Even the Gandhi ashrams at Sabarmati and Wardha, it was structured. It was structured according to the visions of Gandhiji, how a Gram Swaraj can be built up. They have been implementing certain structures for agriculture development, for primary sector development, for education, and many things. They have been experimenting. But finally, what happened? Most of them were partially or completely failure. So this is a big lesson we have to learn while discussing the cause of decentralization. And it is in this context, the constitutional amendments enactment in India, which took place in 1994, 1993-94, becomes very, very important. And at the national level, I would say, even after the constitutional enactment, in most places of the country, substantial changes did not occur. As presented by K.K. Krishnakumar, Kerala's experiment has been exceptional. It has been exceptional in many aspects. Many achievements in education, in health. These are substantial achievements we could make because there have been some political changes also in Kerala. Only because of that, we could provide such changes in Kerala society. Even though Kerala's experiment has been partially successful, at the last part of KK's presentation, he noted some weaknesses of this Kerala system also. I think that's quite natural because in the limited decentralization framework, financial decentralization or resource decentralization is very, very important. What happened in Kerala? Initially, we have been decentralizing or devolving around 31% of the state plan resources to the local governments. It has come down. It has come down due to stringent financial situations. And this year, we could devolve only 27% of the state finance to local governments. And annually, there is an annual increment of 0.5%. And the present government is assuming that it will be standardized by 30% devolution of financial resources. Beyond that, it is not possible. It is not possible in Kerala context. So what I am saying is that even though we have the political vision for decentralization, giving more money or resources to the local governments, more powers to the powers of administration to the local governments, in the present scenario, it is not possible. It's very, very, very difficult. And what is the solution for this? Basically, I will argue for a long campaign for structural changes. Without structural changes, it will be very, very difficult. See, the contradiction KK has been raising, contradiction between people's representatives and citizens. It's a very, very big problem in any society. In Kerala also it is there, because the elected representatives and the people's bodies at the village level or the urban level, they are reluctant to give powers to the lower level. That's quite natural. Everywhere it is there. We can overcome this only through a total political change. So there should be a long-lasting dialogue on the structural changes. Maybe it may be possible to an extent in Kerala, but considering the situations in other states of the country, because we have the same enactments, constitutional enactments are same everywhere. And even in that situation, only Kerala could show certain changes in the development decentralization. And it did not reflect much in the administration decentralization. There is something is there. We have the Gram Sabhas, we have the working groups, we have the planning process, the system, everything. It is there. But the planning process, it is running for the last 26 years. We could run the system very smoothly. And as a result, even now, the 1,200 local governments of Kerala has been preparing their own annual plan and 5-year plan. But what about the resources? No local governments are getting sufficient role in mobilizing their own resources. That is very meager amount, even in Kerala, because in Kerala, local governments are having certain possibilities for mobilize their own resource. In other parts of the country, it is zero. It is zero, almost zero. They don't have their own taxation system for the local governments. They are not getting sufficient money from the state government. All this is there. So resource sharing becomes a major problem of local governments, even in Kerala. Then in other states, there is no need for such arguments. So what I would suggest is that what we can do is creating certain models. Certain models, MP was suggesting, he was calculating for 30,000 population, this much area, this much resources to be mobilized, etc., etc. These are only propositions. In the given scenario of Kerala or India, this is not going to happen everywhere. So we can focus in certain areas so that we can prepare certain working models. And using these models, it's very difficult to prepare that itself. And using this model, we have to campaign throughout the state, throughout the country. And Kerala has been doing this 25, 30 years ago. We have been doing this. And that attempt was partially successful. But still, there are a lot of stringent problems in Kerala also. I'll tell you one example. The enactment for the decentralization in Kerala has been done in 1999, the latest one. The latest enactment was done in 1999. Even after 24 years, even Kerala could not go forward with the new enactments. I can tell you a lot of examples where local government themselves took the responsibility and delivered so many things. For example, the COVID pandemic period, during the natural disasters in 2019 and 21, our local governments have been doing so much for mitigating and reducing the effect of these disasters. These are all done without much powers with them. So we have been arguing for more powers to the local governments, more resources to the local governments, and more opportunities for the local governments. The government and the political parties are considering this. Still, they are not in a position to make substantial changes. So we need a long-lasting campaign at the national level, at the state level. And that campaign should be for structural changes in the political scenario, And I have to add, this is very, very, very difficult. But there is no other option. No other option. We have to take up this responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TG. And Kinchi would like to say something, right? Thank you, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm speaking after our very wise speakers who are all organic intellectuals working relentlessly for the social, for emancipation. Today, I think what is most interesting is that we try to revisit Marxism and Gandhianism to see how this can bring us to thinking new horizons. So why bring the two persons together? And what is common between Marx and Gandhi? I think Marx talks about emancipation of all humans from inequality, from exploitation, from alienation. And Gandhi talked about having a happy, self-sufficient individuals, each contributing to the village republic. So they both start and focus on the individual, then the community. So in MP's words, the ideal for Marx is the union of self-reliant urban Soviets, and for Gandhi, the oceanic circle of federation of self-reliant villages. So I would like to first highlight some of the principles for the self-reliant village republic that MP was quoting. MP quoted from Gandhi, and so the following are Gandhi's words. First, independence should begin at the bottom. Thus, every village will be a republic or panchayat having full powers. It follows, therefore, that every village has to be self-sufficient and capable of managing its affairs, even to the extent of defending itself against the whole world. Second, there will be ever-widening, never-ascending circles. Life will not be a pyramid with the apex sustained by the bottom, but it will be an oceanic circle whose center will be the individual. And third, the outermost circle will not wield powers to crush the inner circles, but will give strength to all within and derives its own strength from it. So these are Gandhi's words, which were quoted by MP. So please note that the idea is ever widening, but never ascending. So what does never ascending means? It means it is a rejection of the vertical structure. So even in modern democratic terms, we often talk about bottom up. So that is not from up. We talk about bottom up as if bottom up is a better choice. But here, the emphasis is that we should not be having these ascending structures or principles, but with the center and like the ripples, then they extend and are ever widening. So the emphasis is from the micro to the macro. So in this sense, the self-reliance is not just at the national level, because we often nowadays, we talk about self-reliance and we think of the nation state. But then the emphasis here is at the village level, self-reliance at the village level. So MP reviewed the 20th century, the experiments of socialism, and I agree very much with one point that he made. He said that what we experimented with in the past century with socialism is that it suffers from many of the features of capitalism, especially in the mistaken notion of abundance. So I had also been talking about this quite a lot, and that is where we especially draw the wisdoms of Gandhi, because in Marxist terms, people would be quoting the idea of the ever-increasing productivity. And so there is this notion of abundance. And so what needs to be changed is the relations of production. But then I think this is, if we look at it in the framework of the climate collapse we are seeing today, the limits of the earth to sustain life on earth, then we know that this is very problematic. which is also why we have been trying to see how we can be drawing on the insights from both Marx and also Gandhi. For Marx, he had the idea of ending also the contradiction between town and country. And Gandhi had this vision of the network of self-reliant village republics. But then I think very often when we talk about ending the contradiction between town and country, where we now have MP's term, which is called the Reuben, there is often the idea, for example, in mainstream thought in China about modernization. So if we want to end this contradiction and to narrow this difference between town and country, we should eliminate the country. We should put all the population into towns, big towns and small towns. We should be eliminating agriculture and the peasants and replace that by industrial agriculture, by AI, by industrial agricultural workers. So there are all these visions about how to end the contradiction, and then they all still operate in the framework of modernization and the current globalization. So I think that is why we faced with all the crises we have today that MP started with in his video. I think if we want to really address the crisis and the roots of the problems, then we will have to be taking wisdoms from different gurus. So to quote Marx, which MP did, he said that Marx presented the main contradiction not only between capital and labor, but between capital and nature. It is both human beings and nature that are being very much exploited by the logic of capital because of its drive for profits. So we have very beautiful models. We have very beautiful models that MP tried to make of how a Reuben republic could look like. And so you heard from the end of the video, and you can see in many of MP's writings that because he had been working, he's a physicist, a scientist, he had been working in the villages for most of his time in his life, and he knows intimately the kind of conditions and possibilities for self-reliance of the villages. And KK also gave us just now an account of the Kerala experience of KSSP and of the People's Planning campaign. And they demonstrate that these are practicable and these are desirable, despite all the problems that we are there and possible failures of in certain parts. So I would like to go a little bit into the practical side, because that is also the strength of MP's visions. He doesn't only give you something that sounds utopian, that sounds romantic. He gives you all the possible ways in which this could be done. So in what he was talking about and with what TG was just quoting just now, so MP said that a Reuben republic could be about 20,000 people in an area of 30 to 40 square kilometers. And he designed that there should be about 100 dairy units, each of about 10 persons, so that there would be the milk and the cow dung for the fertilizer and for the biogas. So that would address the question of agriculture with the compost for agriculture and the biogas as energy for use in the village. So for him, that in this 20,000 people village republic, it could be about 1,000 people working on the dairy units, 1,000 to 2,000 people in the vegetable gardens and growing roots and food. And there could be people working on the biogas plants and food processing and industries. But he stressed that the industries should be there to address the local needs and to reduce the commodity miles and also the socially necessary passenger miles, which is such a waste in the transport of all these commodified food. So he's talking about as much as possible local production for local needs, for local consumption, reduced energy use, and also rejecting capitalism's production of the pseudo needs, which is actually greed. So of course, there's the famous idiom, axiom, that is, the earth has enough for everybody's needs, but not for people's greed. So in my view, the People's Planning Campaign was a bold attempt at implementing such a vision, as KK just explained. And at the Kerala scale, it involved over 30 million people. And it was a very important democratic effort and democratic experiment. But then, unsurprisingly, this is very much underreported and underanalyzed, not to say being praised or commended. I think maybe this is because it is not a kind of big step forward in modernization and in the so-called kind of corresponding political democracy of that particular industrializing path. So the question is, so MP proposed such a model, but is this feasible? So we know that local governance must have self-sufficiency in production and in political economics, as Mano just explained. So I would just give you an example. Many of you have come to Hong Kong and to Lingnan University, and you might have gone to the neighboring housing estate just next to Lingnan University campus, the Futai housing estate in Hong Kong. So that is where you get all your supplies or from the supermarket, and you could eat out in the 4 restaurants there. So for this Futai housing estate, we have 12 buildings, each of 40 floors, and the total population is 17,000. So, but then this is on an area of only several football fields. So, of course, this cannot be self-sufficient. This is far, far from MP's ideal. Although MP also mentioned about the same population, he has a much bigger area in his idea, and also people working on production of food, especially. So this is totally impossible, just in Lingnan University or in our neighboring Futai estate. But then, is this really impossible? If we look at look around us, apart from Kerala, we also have some very good examples from China. So, for example, I've been to Zhoujiazhuang, and that is the place where we took some of the participants of the first South-South Forum. And this is the last people's commune in China today. So in Zhoujiazhuang, I will just give you some very simple data. It has an area of 16 square kilometers, 5,000 households, 15,000 population. And so the ideal and very much matching, corresponding to MP's ideal model. So this being the last people's commune in China today, they still first give priority to growing their own staple food. So then they would count how much they would need for the food for their own consumption. So they would give priority to growing that in their fields. Then they would produce seeds or other fruit trees, etc., for ecotourism, etc. So this is still standing today. So that could be one example to support MP's model. And so I would like to end with stressing the two concepts, urban and prosumers. So urban is not two separate concepts of the rural and the urban. It is one integrated concept with rural coming first. And it's like the term prosumers. It's not two separate identities as producer and consumer. It is also one integrated identity. P is producing, not parasitical. Of course, many of the consumers are actually P-consumers, parasitical consumers. But we are talking about producer, consumer in one person. So that is, we are producing and consuming, and we are living as much as possible, a good quality life. So Gandhi said, such a society is necessarily highly cultured, in which every man and woman knows what he or she wants, and what more, knows that no one should want anything that others cannot have with equal amount of labor. I think we should take this and also think about this, that this is the ideal of equality and justice, that if we shouldn't be consuming and wanting more than others who have who also contribute the same amount of labor but cannot get that. So this is a direct countering of the kind of elitism and egoism and consumerism that we have today. So to address all these crises of destruction and to hold up the idea of sustainability, so we need to examine the roots of our manifold crises today, and to be able to think boldly. We need a vision, like what MP and Mano and Anita and KK had been stressing, that and also like what Vandana Shiva also said in the first lecture this year. We have to make peace with the earth, and all these different processes for self-reliance should be encouraged and attempted. And we should be going into the questions of deglobalization, de-urbanization, de-industrialization, although they do not sound very so-called progressive in the modern terms. But I think people are talking about such kind of self-reliance at the very local level when they are thinking of scenarios of disasters. For example, scenarios of war, scenarios of aftermath of nuclear catastrophe or climate collapse. So they need to work from the so-called very primitive beginning. So I think we better not wait until we are in a very disastrous situation that we have to be reacting to negative forces, but then to be able to be working positively to try to lay the groundwork for such self-sufficiency. And I thank again our speakers today. They are telling us, especially for Mano and Anita, they stress the question of education, which means that we need not only change our system, not only change the structure, which TG mentioned, and I agree, but then we need to change our mind. We need to be detoxified from the thinking of modernization, which follows the colonialist Eurocentric models. And so we discussed this during the delinking session last Saturday. So education is so very important, but what kind of education do we need? What kind of values do we subscribe to? And what kind of mind do we need to train ourselves and our students so that we would be, even if not in practice, implement the village, the self-sufficient village republic in our immediate environment, but still we know what is to be desired and what kind of mainstream thinking we need to be countering. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Kinchi. And I think we have friends from South Africa, Devon Pillar, if I'm wrong, if I'm correct. So please, Devon, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Please,
you.
yeah, we can't see your face on the screen.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, please introduce yourself and then comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And greetings to Kinchi. We knew each other many, many years back. And I'm reminded of a discussion we once had, and I drew these concentric circles, which comes from underdevelopment theory, and the core and periphery. And I had the core in the center, and of course the concentric circles. And I remember Kinchi saying, oh, well, it could be, that picture could be quite easily inverted. And at that time it wasn't elaborated on, and of course now you talk about the oceanic circles, and I completely understand what you were getting at. So I'm from South Africa. I'm from the University of the Witwatersrand. I'm in the sociology department, but currently I'm head of the Global Labor University. And I've been writing a lot and thinking a lot about exactly this issue. So Marx and Buddha, Buddha as a sort of a figure for a whole range of thinkers, including Gandhi, and the notion of happiness, etc. So this is all very interesting and exciting for me to be part of this morning's, or to hear this morning's inputs. I came across this by accident through a colleague of mine, Patrick Bond, who sent me the link. So I immediately joined up. And I've also been to Kerala in 1996. I think it was the beginning of another wave of participatory democracy in Kerala, and been very inspired by that. So it was good to get this update about where things are, this review. In fact, I would love to see I don't know if that can be posted or if it's available, a review of this whole period, the positive and negative experience in Kerala. If KK, if that's available. I want to make just some further observations, in fact, inspired by the input of KK in the first instance. As I said, my thinking has been around the integrating the thinking of the Buddha, not necessarily Buddhism, but the Buddha as we know it, and Marx, and the synergies there. And Gandhi himself also found inspiration from the Buddha, and also invoking Ashoka, King Ashoka, who apparently, according to some scholars, created the world's first welfare state. That may or may not be an exaggeration, but nonetheless, it was quite inspirational at the Buddha's thinking was quite inspirational at that time to move the whole Indian subcontinent around Buddhist thought. So Gandhi was not just a narrow Hindu thinker with the caste implications, which we have problematized today, but broader than that, and his thinking evolved in these discussions with Ambedkar. Now, I'm no expert in all of those those levels of thinking, but the one thing that struck me was, KK, you mentioned Ambedkar as someone who was not, someone who moved towards Buddhism, but at the same time had a very centralized notion and understanding of socialism, top-down notion. And I do note you said that you were an Ambedkarite. So I was wanting you to expand on that. In what sense? Obviously, Ambedkar was a promoter of Dalit rights and the rights of the most oppressed people. So that would be one aspect. So that contradiction of the very top-down understanding of socialism, which would have been at polar opposites to Gandhi's thinking. So I just wanted you to elaborate a bit more on that. And then when we talk about the elites, I understand where that's coming from. The empowering the people, as very eloquently described by Amita, empowering the people, but you also made a very important qualification. To some extent, they have knowledge. And I think that's very important to qualify how we think about this, because the notion of the elites, then the pandemic brought this up, the COVID, the notion that elites are all wrong and we've got to find knowledge elsewhere and debunk all the knowledge of scientists is, of course, a very populist, right-wing populist mobilization that is very dangerous. It was used in Brexit, for example. Of course, it was elites arguing against elites. Trump uses that, for example. So there's a right-wing neo-fascist mobilization against elites, which of course we are not, we don't want. And I like your qualification that to some extent, KK, when you mentioned elites, if I'm remembering you correctly, you didn't make that qualification, or I'm sure you do. So I just wanted perhaps further reflection on how we talk about this elites versus the people, because of course we are all elites, educated elites, and we intervene in these processes, and so we play a role. So it's getting that balance right, I suppose. So I just wondered if there were. If you wanted to come back to elaborate further on that. And I wanted to mention one very exciting social experiment happening in real time today. Kerala was very encouraging for many of us in the past. Today, we have a very exciting social experiment happening in northern Syria, the Rojava. In a different cultural context, but Marx is there. Gandhi is not necessarily there, but Marx is there, but also the social ecology perspective and anarchist perspectives coming together, and Marxist feminist perspectives coming together very strongly in that context. I didn't hear too much about the feminist perspectives in Kerala from our speakers and how that features the eco-feminist dimension, and but nonetheless, I thought for those who are perhaps unfamiliar or I don't know about Rojava in northern Syria, it's basically a real-time social revolution happening where women are playing a major role in transforming society under enormous threats, military threats from Turkey and ISIS, the Islamic fundamentalists. So I thought I'll just throw that out there. There's a lot one could say further about Rojava. But they're also, from my understanding, are interested in promoting local economic development, local empowerment, and self-reliance. It's not a state because they don't believe in states, but it's, in a sense, it's like Kerala. It's an entity within a larger national formation. So I thought I'd just mention those points without saying too much. And thank you for this very, very encouraging discussion.
Thank you very much, David. And next, respondent will be Evan John. Please. Could you unmute yourself? Please introduce yourself and then comments. Thank you.
I'm Edwin John from India, and I have long been an admirer of our this presentation. The main person today, MP Parameshwaran, yes. I have long been an admirer. I have interacted with him. I have invited him for our meetings. And then what struck me most in his presentation, the insistence on people themselves governing themselves, one. And for this, I too have been doing something similar. And we created for this a kind of a system called neighborocracy. And the idea of the movement of neighborocracy is building structures at the base where people could talk together and think together and decide together. And for this, we give us one of the principles, smallification, we say. And that means, if the forum, the bigger the forum becomes, only the big voices are heard. So if want even the last and the least person, the small person, to talk and be a participant, we need to have small sized forums. And then we need to have multi-tier federations at various levels, but ensuring that at every level, the forums for people's participation remain small in size. So we said, why not a forum of about 30 families at the base? And then these forums could be federated at the level of the ward, and in India we call panchayat, that's local self-governance. And then it could be federated at the level of this, what we call, what Mr. MP Parameswaran calls urban republic. My concern is to ensure that within this urban republic, there is enough provision for people's participation on a sustained basis. In such a way, even the last and the least person has a scope to talk. So we evolved the concept of this multi-tier federation of small-sized forums, which we call neighborhood parliaments, of about 30 family seats. And they get federated at the level of the ward, panchayat, then in India we call block, which is a sub-district unit, then at the level of the panchayat, and then the district, then the state, nation, and so on. One level electing for the next level. So in this situation, one advantage is that here people at the base could really rule. They are not anymore the implementers of the decisions made on the top, but they decide. And they send their representative. And since the forums are small at every level, any day you can call back a representative you send from one circle to another concentric circle. Any day you can call him back. And when you have the provision, call back any day, the person at the base keeps the power in his hands. The reins of power is in his hands. He can control the whole process. This is more or less the gist of this neighborocracy. And then whatever our MP Parameswaran has been saying, we try to integrate there. And then the ideals of Marxism, Gandhianism, everything could be integrated in this structure. So we try to build a kind of a system of what we call governance from below, which is another version of concentric circles, oceanic circles, like linking to one another. And this we are trying to create, and I have written a kind of a booklet on this we call Hello Democracy. And then we integrate another thing here, kind of what we call sociocracy. That is a kind of a system evolved in the Netherlands, where people are enabled to make decisions without dividing themselves. No majority, minority divisions. A kind of a consent-based decision making, and then also the consent-based elections. Not majority-based. You don't need to collect people to get your view across. Every view is listened to. Every view is taken seriously and integrated, and they evolve a consent-based proposal where everybody can give a no objection. Okay, it may not be what exactly I want, but still I can give a go ahead to that. So he forms a part of the decision making at every decision. So this kind of a system we are trying to introduce. And again, as a part of this, we also introduce marketing from below. That below and above, as this was mentioned in by one of the panelists, not a healthy word, but for time being we use that. So marketing from below. Can people themselves be doing the business? More or less another version, a kind of adaptation of Mr. MD Parameshwaran's concept. So what I say, we are trying to promote this. We would like to be in dialogue. I am happy in this to be in this group where whatever everybody is saying is more or less what we want to achieve. We want to be in interaction. And so I stop for time being. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Edwin John. And I would like to invite Eka from Indonesia. Eka, please.
Thank you for the time. Okay, I've always been fascinated with Kerala and also with the concept where Gandhian philosophy meets with Marxist theory in practice. So my question will be very short, actually. Is there any known example of similar experimentations that had been done outside Kerala in India in a location where it is more urbanized? So I've been trying to grasp the context where is it possible to duplicate or start a new experiment based on the experience that Kerala had in a location which is more urbanized. I think that's all my question. Thank you for the time.
Okay, and Bridget has a question. So please.
I wanted to ask the Kerala friend who talked about the feminism. Not women didn't come, but men are talking about the feminism. That's it said. But my question to them is, are women of Kerala really empowered? If so, why they are committing suicides at a greater rate compared to other states of India? The reference is Swapna Mukhopadhyay, the enigma of Kerala women. Please explain. Has the patriarchy vanished from Kerala society? Thank you.
Thank you. And I would to read some comments from Margot. I think the idea of what she or he wants is very problematic in this era of materialism and consumerism across the globe. And how do we capture people's hearts and imagination to related paths that will move them toward our visions? How do we help ourselves and others to become the person we must become to both build and sustain the world we want to create? I believe not just mine, but more fundamentally, perhaps our hearts and soul. And apart from the Kerala experiment, we Global University for Sustainability also look into the experience of Rojava in North Syria. And we organized 10 lectures about this experiment. So I typed the link. You can find the previous 5 lectures about Kerala experience. And we still have 5 lectures to go. So please pay attention to this series. And I think now we are in the last round of discussion. So I would like to invite our panelists to respond all those comments from the floor. So please, KK, could you be the first one?
Thank you all. There are several questions. Interesting. I may not be able to answer all the questions because of time constraint and also because of my incompetency. I'm not an expert of everything, but I'll share my views. Mr. Devan Pillai was talking about Ambedkar. I will not elaborate on that. The Gandhi-Ambedkar debate is quite famous, and Ambedkar is not just a Dalit leader, as everybody knows. He provided a completely different perspective, which is still very valid. And the debate has been discussed. Some of you must have seen the famous Arundhati Roy book on Gandhi-Ambedkar debate and so on. The thing is that, Ambedkar was trying to say that I don't think he was against decentralization, or he was a top-to-down idea man. He was basically talking about the reality of Indian village, which is basically because of the caste-ridden nature of Indian society. Everything is influenced by casteism, and you will have to take that into consideration when you make Gram Swaraj or village as the central local point of development. That was the idea. So probably he was talking about social transformation followed by decentralization. And he was not totally against all kinds of decentralization. That's what I understand. And that is why decentralization and Panchayati Raj entered into the directive principles of state policy. It's still there, and that is approved by people, including Ambedkar. That's my quick reflection to that. It's a topic where you can discuss quite a lot. Ambedkar's viewpoint, especially with regard to the marginalized sections of the society, casteism, etc., are still very valid. And the debate actually should go on. It's going on. The second thing is about the feminist perspective, I think. I forgot actually to mention about an interesting development which happened along with the People's Planning Campaign, which is called the Kudumbashree. Kudumbashree is, Kudumbam is family, and Shri is welfare, family welfare, you can say. It's a name of one of the largest women's networks which has developed over a period of time in Kerala. Its beginning actually was a little before People's Plan Campaign, but in consonance with the People's Planning Campaign, Kudumbashree has become a big force. Kudumbashree basically is an association of village women, mostly. About 46 million women are members of that. They are organized in neighborhood groups. They are further organized across area development societies. We call it ADS, and CDS, community development societies. And it's a completely elected system, which has, and initially Kudumbashree was, this association of women was formulated as a program against for poverty alleviation. But now it has become a huge empowerment program where women entrepreneurs have come out. Women are into almost every section of society, every section of what they call development now. They are leaders in many fields. I will say that it's a very, very promising enterprise that has come across. And the Kudumbashree program, the women's program, the women's network, and the local self-governments are interacting with each other in a very positive manner. And lots of things, I hope, will be coming out of that. I'll quickly connect here the point with Vijud was asking, the suicide rate of women, etc., etc. I will not say that women in Kerala are completely liberated, patriarchy is completely out, and no, all those will be false claims. The only important thing is that women have started organizing, and many important new spaces are getting opened for women, and it's quite promising. But still, the suicide rate is on the increase. There are different theories about that. The tension between what you call this opportunity and traditionality probably is one of the reasons. There are various examples, like, for example, educated women are not able to cope up with patriarchy anymore. But patriarchy in certain sections are still existing. This tension is leading them to things like suicide. And this is definitely a matter of concern. So I don't have any standard solution for that. The crime rates against women is on the increase at times. And the explanation normally given is that because women are educated, more and more organized and so on, more and more cases are getting reported. That is one of the reasons. I don't know whether it is correct or not. But my answer to your question is there are so many problems remaining to be solved. Patriarchy is still a sleeping patriarchy. It's a different kind of patriarchy. You know, I sometimes say that the male community in Kerala is learning to kind of exist despite all these modern ideas and organization of women. So you will need better strategies to cope with this empowered matriarchy, what you call the men-dominated society. So though women are getting organized and different spaces are getting opened in front of them, problems still remain, and new kind of opposition, new kind of strategies will have to be developed. I'm sure strategies like the Kudumbashree will pave a way towards that. That's my quick response to that. Then there are so many questions. I don't know whether I will be able to go into. Eka was asking about Kerala, example in other parts of India. Anita was mentioning, and rightly so, Kerala is not just a rural area. It's slowly evolving into something like an urban scenario. Towns in Kerala and rural areas in Kerala are mixing up so well that I don't know whether you can call them urban in the sense MP is calling them, but definitely there is a transformation. If properly planned, it's possible for Kerala to develop a urban thing. But at present, because of various kinds of ideas coming together, challenge from globalization, we have not been able to completely develop the urban concept. So far as other parts of India are concerned, there are some examples in Bihar and so on. I don't remember the names now. Small experiments are going on in urban settings. I will try to kind of get some names and send to the group later. See, one or two small points that I would like to mention are this. One, MP has been talking about bringing Gandhi and Marx to the present context. He was not talking about just imitating them. That's very important, I think. Their ideas will have to be kind of brought to the present context and then used. That's very important. And in that context, I would say that issues like technology, we are conducting this conference, for example, across the continents with the help of digital technology. MP has been talking about using technology and science for creating urban republics, for empowering rural self-reliant republics. It's not an MP actually called, MP was saying about the biogas as a new kind of reactors, just like the nuclear reactor. I think there is a lot of point in that. MP has been talking about while responding to Schumacher's Small is Beautiful book, he was saying that small should not only be beautiful, it should be powerful as well. Fortunately, I think the digital technology, many aspects of that, not all, artificial intelligence, etc., are providing us opportunities to kind of make people more powerful, make participation more meaningful and creative. We are using a digital technology in a big way. In the new Panchayati Raj system, many items are digitalized and people can now get services to their sitting in their home. They can participate and give their point of views using digital technology and so on and so on. This will have to be kind of further explored. So it's not a question of going back to Gandhiji and Marx and bringing them to our situation and using their ideas in the present context. Technology is generally considered to be kind of a monopoly of capitalism or what a modernity, etc., etc. MP has been saying, no, it's not like that. How to empower small using technology. The ideas of that level will have to be discussed. There are several details which MP discusses in collected works. When he collected works, we are trying to collect his writings. So many ideas will flow from out of that. So basically, MP's ideas will have to be kind of seen in the present context. He is not running away from the existing context. Existing context is providing us a lot of opportunity, new science, new technology, in combination with the ideas that in Kinchi's word, gurus have provided, will have to be synthesized in a particular, in a very special manner so as to suit our situation. And it has to be done locally. It varies from place to place. So these are some of the thoughts that come to my mind. There are several questions. I don't know whether I have responded to all of them, but these are some of the ideas that I can quickly place before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, KK. And the next will be Anita, please.
Thanks. I'd like to start and respond to what Margot had raised about education and the mind, and how do we think about these ideas further. And it said that, you know, we have to think of hearts and souls. Totally, yes. In fact, the way we look at education and the way we are working in education and the way Gandhi looked at education, in fact, productive work is the medium of education, as Gandhi and the Zakir Hussain committee, you know, the basic Nai Talim model of education, 1938, the committee had come out with this and come out with it in the same hall where we now work as part of the school. So when they look at that, they say it's head, heart, and hand. And that's why productive work is the medium, and you learn everything else through this, because that is what it engages you with. And all our education policies in free India, you know, when India became free and the policies that came after that, they've always spoken about this working together. What does it mean? I mean, in fact, wherever, even in secondary education, all the disciplines were supposed to be through work, trying to understand the diverse disciplines and in integrated ways. But even the notion of discipline, for instance, how do people work and what kind of discipline? It said that you have to do this when you're working together. There is no outside force which is trying to discipline you and control you. You're learning to understand each other. You're learning to engage with each other and with differences. And the fact that we work on something with our hands and with our minds and our souls actually then gives us a meaning of how we discipline ourselves. There's no outside punishment or reward, even in a school. So, you know, I'm saying that the idea of work was very central, and it was supposed to bring the head, heart, and hand together. And that's how we see it. Even today, when we work with one school or another school, and we are talking of education through work-based education. But I'd like to link it with Kerala, for instance, and the challenges there. So I'm right now working with the government, and I'm a member of the core committee, which is working on curriculum revision with in the scenario of our new policy. And as I said, our policy is extremely problematic, and it tries to segregate people, it tries to segregate skill from knowledge. But even in Kerala, I had raised this with this government, that they look at vocational education in the traditional way, in fact, even worse, because their vocational education was a separate section of the, it was not part of general education. The school is also isolated. So it becomes labeled, and most people, including the head of the education directorate, felt that vocational education is meant for disabled children. So it was quite surprising for me to see how, I mean, not so surprising, but yes, that the way Kerala, which is sort of almost everyone, there's almost total literacy, everyone goes through school, everyone wants to go in for high-tech education. Even in school, they don't want to do things with their hand. That's the general perception. And where schools are trying to do things with their hands, including to climb coconut trees, because the coconuts are drying, because Kerala depends on labor of, menial, this kind of manual labor from people coming from poorer states. So there is, in their minds and the way they look at it, working with your hands is not to be done, is not good status, even if you're poor. It's the person from Bihar or Orissa, the other states who are poorer will come and they will do this work. So that is a challenge. So what I have been trying to convince, and I hope it'll be a major thing if we can manage to do it in Kerala, where work education, not vocational education, becomes compulsory, mandatory for everyone, and it's exciting. It's not this low status kind of stuff that is normally done. It's exciting, it's creative, and it becomes a part of all learning. So everyone does at least one course. And within that, I'm looking at things like even digital technologies, which in our country is a major issue because it's being used more and more by school systems for surveillance of teachers and students. It's used by social media, which doesn't differentiate between fake and true, and people get killed over these false media used in social media. So, and for democracy, we know how these algorithms can actually affect people's own understandings about the world around them. So we are trying to say that a work-based course, which is also looks at social and the mathematical algorithms and the science and the digital technologies. So, this is the kind of way I think that we push this even at higher levels of education. And right now I see Kerala as one place which can do it. And I hope that this dream of ours sort of comes through, where work-based education becomes mandatory, at least one course for everyone, so that it is a high status knowledge course, and it is exciting, creative, and it integrates these many different fields. So that is one thing. And the other thing that I want to comment on is, yes, patriarchy is a serious problem. In education, we are trying to address this, but there are still challenges. When there is a workshop that is planned for gender equity, and there are a lot of things happening in schools where schools have taken up uniforms, which they call gender neutral uniforms. Not a very good word. I don't think you can remove gender by just wearing dress, which anyone can wear. But yes, there is a lot of backlash from religious groups, including the Muslim groups, who say, no, you can never talk of gender equity and, things like that. So we have to then be strategic and cautious. And we have been doing workshops there with saying gender justice, which has not had a problem. But there are issues, not just religious issues. Yes, there are middle class issues. Patriarchy is very deeply embedded. I mean, There are beautiful films coming out, which you look at the kitchen and you know how patriarchy is embedded in Kerala society, especially in middle class society. So these are challenges which I think also through education we really need to address very sensitively. One thing about the elite and people, no, one is conscious about this. We are not really talking about these divisions, whether it's science and whether it's people's knowledge, but we will be looking at, sort of when I say democratizing knowledge, it is then also trying to say that no knowledge is really elite. Yes, people may be doing things, but like I questioned here within Kerala itself, even working with hands is not considered good enough for everyone to be doing. So these are kinds of issues. Democratizing itself is a challenge, both in society, in knowledge systems, in the way we work, in structures, in planning and production. So I think we have to look across these domains and keep our direction and our commitments and our passions in our collective passions together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. And Mano, you will be the last.
Thank you. Our time is past, therefore I'll be very brief. It has been a very encouraging discussion. To Devin and Margot, the effort is going on in different parts of the world, as Margaret pointed out, the Syrian case and so on, or you yourself mentioned. But also in India, the Vikalpa Sangam website would list many experiments in different parts of India, in education, alternative production process, and so on. Jivan Sala program of NAPM. South Forum had a great session 2 years ago on Mendalekha experiment, and so on. So that's, therefore, and of course, the Latin American experiments are a source of great inspiration to the whole world's movement for alternative possibilities. Now, 2 quick points, one on knowledge. To Devin, I would say that Anita has already explained, there has been a 200-year-old colonial discourse debunking indigenous knowledge systems all over the colonies, former colonies, and particularly the indigenous people. And the educational system has perpetuated that. And Gandhi protested that. Therefore, there is a whole discourse on Swaraj ideas in India, that is self-determination or the value of indigenous knowledge. Now, but it has to be subjected to the same critique that all knowledge should be subjected to, all cultures should be subjected to, all traditions should be subjected to all over the world. Therefore, just because Hindutva forces or some fascist forces, somewhere racist forces take up selectively some traditional knowledge systems and project it as alternatives to some modern scientific and technological systems, we should not, give up the whole sector of indigenous knowledge. I think this is a long debate. Everybody is familiar with it, but I think it's very, very important to engage in that debate and defend people's democratic traditions, democratic knowledge systems. That's one. Second, on urban, I have a feeling even rural-urban division is a European post-Renaissance Reformation, capitalist epoch concept, where urbanization emerged as the alternative, as modernization. and so on. The enclosure movement and so on, England and so on. Whereas habitats of humans and all living beings in all different locations, mountain people, river people, water people, plains people, semi-plain people, forest people, and trade center concentrations developing, and so, this so-called high skyscraper, high consumption, high energy, high rise, high speed. This is a capitalist idea of progress, not the socialist idea of progress. I'm afraid some practicing communist parties and regimes adopted part of that. Yes, release of productive forces can achieve what capitalism can. I think that was a wrong interpretation of Marxism and socialism and communism. Communism is about liberation, freedom, and the moral, material, and aesthetic, the complete fulfillment. Therefore, many kinds of habitations of people. Therefore, while rural-urban is a fantastic new concept that we should project against urbanization, we have to go still further to the basic concept of habitat of people and how habitats of people with nature, how the new concept of good living has to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, and the oceanic circle. By the way, decentralization had many meanings, and we have already discussed that. But Lenin, Soviets of workers, Mao, commune, and Gandhi, the Gram Swaraj. These were, and there are many other examples all over the world. They believed in this, not against the pyramid, this, the oceanic circle from below. That is federation of self-determining, self-reliant. Therefore, I think we have a hard battle to fight, but we have a tradition on the basis of which we can stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manu. And we have last comment from Gus. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this very good debate. Allow me some short reflection. I would like to stress the importance of movements in the relationship between social and ecological issues. Using a few examples from the South Asian region. The Bhopal disaster in 1984, with the explosion of the Union Carbide factory, is considered to be one of the most serious industrial disasters in the world. It claimed thousands of victims and continues to do so. It highlighted the impunity of multinationals, which pushed forward the legal independence of subsidiaries. The social movement revealed the consequences of the role of multinationals in the global legal arena. The second example is the Pakistan Fisherfolk Forum, led by Muhammad Ali Shah, who recently passed away. He was one of the organizers of the World Social Forum in Karachi in 2006. The Pakistan Forum organizes fishermen and their families. Faced with pollution in the Indus Delta, it had become a very active environmental association. Constantly stopped by border guards, the fishermen are committed to peace over Kashmir. Over the floods of 2010, the fishermen were evicted from the beaches in favor of luxury hotels. The third example is the peasant movement a remarkable example of the radical nature of movements. La Via Campesina, with almost 200 million members, is the largest organized social movement in the world. The peasant movement has succeeded in persuading the world, starting with itself, that agriculture is more modern than agro-industry and compatible with the defense of nature. La Via Campesina has promoted food sovereignty. Reflecting on Gandhian Marx is an excellent way of opening up the discussion on the period ahead. The rise of extreme right-wing idea in the world today is linked to the difficulty of thinking beyond capitalism. We need to start from the new movements that are accompanying the social struggles of workers and peasants: the feminist movement, the ecologist movement, the indigenous peoples movement, the anti-racist movement, the migrant movement. They are opening up new avenues, but not yet present a common project. This is our next task. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gus. And in parallel to this webinar about the Gandhian Marxism and local governance and MP ideas, and Kinchi and KK actually are editing an anthology of MP's writing, selecting from 13 volumes of his English writings. It will be published by Palgrave Macmillan soon, and it is also will be published in Chinese in Global South Thought series. And the first volume has just come out. It is the book named The Destiny of Civilization, which is written by US Marxist economist Michael Hudson. So we are very looking forward to MP's anthology, both in English and Chinese.